Right, inverse. I've never heard of this website, but there's an interview about Criterion. And they talked about some stuff. With the release of patch 6.25, Final Fantasy XIV introduced a wildly popular new feature, Variant and Criterion. Okay, this is already incorrect. It's not that popular. I don't know about wildly popular, man. When it first came out, yes, but the second one was not as popular, especially Savage, but we'll get there. I think Variant was more popular. Variant I will agree with. Variant dungeons are designed around choice and replayability, focusing on puzzles and branching paths in addition to battle content. Criterion dungeons are visually similar but incredibly difficult on par with Extreme Trials and Savage Raids. Yeah, that is kind of true. With 2 Variant and Criterion dungeons now available in 14, the features seem to be a hit of the player base. The feedback we've received has been positive overall, says battle content designer Masatoshi Ishikawa. I was especially relieved to see many players welcome the concept of Variant dungeons which involve smaller groups and plenty of puzzle solving. Yeah, I'm just gonna go and look at a Reddit post, I'll be honest. When I come to finishing that, which I do need to do, by the way. Following the release of patch 6.45 and FanFest in July, Inverse spoke to Ishikawa and Walker assistant directors Tsuyoshi Yokozawa about the design and philosophy behind Variant and Criterion. I am sorry about my pronunciation. They also offered some intriguing hints about how these challenges might evolve in the future.
She swings like a dreamer, Lou.
Sork, thank you for the tier 2 for 31, man. Appreciate it. Huge support. Welcome back, dude. Thank you, man. Yo, Silky was a good boss, man. What has the player reception been like to Variant and Criterion? How has that reception shaped your future plans? Moving forward, I'd like to keep what was well received while improving upon the aspects that were inconvenient. Beginning in patch 6.4, the party list shows which variant actions your party members have equipped, which came about from that line of thinking. Okay, so quality of life, good. Criterion dungeons were our first high-end content for smaller groups and received a lot of positive feedback from players who enjoyed tackling them with a party of friends. That said, the difficulty of Criterion dungeons is comparable to an 8-player Savage raid, if not harder. Savage, yes. Normal, no. So there were also comments that felt the current rewards aren't motivating enough to attempt the content. Thank you! Holy fuck! They're starting to understand. I mean, that line alone is extremely encouraging. As someone who's very critical, I am always willing to give credit where credit is due. And that is extremely helpful. To know that they've realized. The rewards need to be determined very carefully in relation to rewards for other content, but we will continue deliberating on the idea to satisfy as many players as possible. Look, I'm gonna be honest, man. It's not that complicated. Part of this issue is due to the strict gearing in this game and how nothing ever changes. In terms of, what content gives what gear. But all you have to do is just put, tome rewards. Tome upgrade rewards. Shines, twines, coatings. Just put them in. Either a drop weekly, or like buy with currency that you get from the dungeon, or like random drops in chests. That's all you have to do, man. And it will make it so much better. And if you want to add extra stuff like mounts and minions or like whatever else, yes, I know there's a mount from the normal. Like, do that too. Like, you don't have to think that hard about it. Like, you really don't have to think that hard. Like, part of it's not their fault, because again, the gearing in this game is so strict and so formulaic that I understand why he says they have to think carefully about that. But I don't see how, like, upgrades and stuff would hurt that. Because, as you say, it is still hard content. And it drops earlier than, like, the catch-up coins from Alliance Raids. With varying difficulty in the branching paths of these dungeons, how much work does it take to get things right? How long are they typically in development? To achieve the right difficulty level, we follow our usual thought process with 4-player dungeons, but also had to remember that parties could have fewer players or lack certain roles. Since variant dungeons were meant to feel like a typical 4-player dungeon of any party composition, we built a new system in which all 3 roles are weighed equally, and the difficulty only changes based on the number of participants. That was good. Like, that was nice. It was good just letting people play what they want. Just coming away from the formula. We began development somewhere between 1 to 1.5 patches earlier than usual in order to build the new system, its branching paths, and the accompanying NPCs animations. I mean, like, I think Variant is cool. Like, I think Variant is a cool piece of content. Like, it's not that replayable, because once you've done all the 12 endings, like, that's it, right? But, you know, like, that's fine. You still do it a number of times. It's probably cool to do blind and try and work it out. You know, I don't think Variant is bad. I think, Criterion is the issue. How about make gear not just number goes big and give it individual cool perks? Well, that would be nice and all. But this is a game that prides itself on good balancing, but unfortunately they fucked that up anyway, this expansion. Like, just due to a myriad of other reasons that I don't want to go into for the 25th time, unfortunately. At least not right now. So, like, yes, I agree. It would be nice to have some flair to gear, but the game is too formulaic for that. Like, everything is too strict. Sadly. So it would just be, like, grossly unbalanced. But do we want that? Well, no. But while they design themselves into this corner, we can't have nice things. Like, like, that's the sad reality. Well, they design themselves into a corner like this. We don't, like, there's not really any room for these extra things. Building the new system was a one-off task, but future variant dungeons still have to be balanced for 1 to 4 participants, various different paths, and more. They still require a lot of work, more work than the standard 4-player dungeon. The difference is especially apparent with background design, since additional paths directly translate to more work to be done. I mean, you know, I do not doubt that. How do you design the bosses for Variant and Criterion? How is it different from the boss design in standard dungeons? Designing bosses for Variant and regular dungeons involves the same overall process. We're provided with the boss's lore, which we use to rough out its main concept and then brainstorm its main mechanics. I'd say the main differences of Variant are planning out its branching paths and their associated mechanics, whereas creating mechanics can be resolved regardless of party size. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's hard to make. I think they do well. Again, the issue is just with Criterion and how it's like one specific path. And it just... I don't know. A bit more randomization would have been cool. Bosses are usually designed with only their lore in mind, so creating battle mechanics that are indirectly related to the boss, like turning a dial switch located elsewhere in the dungeon, proved to be a challenge for many of our staff. What? Furthermore, we had certain limitations to work with. For example, considering how players might choose to participate solo. We couldn't use mechanics that required multiple players to stack together or spread out for target AoEs. Criterion dungeon bosses are even more challenging to design. I mean, but then you can use those things. I mean, hell, you even put loop in one of the bosses. That was fucking terrifying. It's somewhat similar to designing 8-player raids in that we're creating 2 separate difficulties, but variant dungeons are about as hard as 4-player dungeon, whereas Criterion dungeons are equivalent to Savage. So the difficulty gap between normal and Savage raids pales in comparison. Yeah, I mean, it is a lot harder. Like, the Criterion dungeon that, like, released in 6.45 was hard, man. Like, it was tough. Especially figuring it out blind. They're tough. I think they did really well at designing bosses that were difficult to do. It's done and viable. Okay, nice. Like, the Criterion problem is just the incentive, the replayability, and the ability to find people that want to do it as a result. And then also Savage Criterion just being kinda shit. Honestly. Creating bosses Criterion dungeons required staff members who not only could retool variant dungeon mechanics and resources finding content, but keep the necessary development resources under control. Notable aspect of Criterion Dungeon, and more accurately the difference between 4 and 8-player content, is how there's only one tank and one healer, and individual DPS players have more responsibility. No tank swaps meant more emphasis on positioning enemies or having tanks stand in front of the party. Right, look, I'm gonna be real here. Like, you can do both. Tank swaps are not that difficult. Like, are we getting, like, some insight into why tanks don't do anything in, like, Savage anymore? Like what? Like, bruv, you've already said you're making, like, Savage level or harder content. Like, why would that matter? You just do both in, like, Savage. I'm not talking about Criterion here. I think it's good that they make you move a boss and shit. But in Savage raids, now none of that exists. Consider this. The reason tanks are bad now is because they're not taught to be better. Like, why do you think the skill floor is so low? And the skill ceiling not that high? Because we're in an era where boss design does not require people to think very hard. Like, that's just how it is. Like, I'm sorry. That's the reality. By lowering a skill floor, you give less incentive for people to learn. The benefit is that more people do it. But it also frustrates a lot more people. The healer could be a pure or barrier healer, so you have to design more for mechanics rather than incoming damage. I mean, yeah. Like, that makes sense. And that shows in this Criterion dungeon. Furthermore, we had to place a restrict. Also, it did kind of hurt. Furthermore, we had to place restriction on raises to avoid a disparity between DPS jobs with and without access to raise. With all that said, there are also advantages. Designing mechanics that require determining party member priority and giving each player an equal amount of responsibility were easy with a small party size. Yeah. Makes sense. Do you have any plans to evolve or change the formula for variant and Criterion dungeons? Here we go. Can we expect variant and Criterion to stick around throughout 7.0? And have you thought about how new jobs might work in previous variant dungeons? We don't have plans to change their fundamental formula at the moment. Please change Savage. I'm begging you. Please. Don't make Savage just an arbitrary slog. The rewards for Criterion dungeons are still mostly cosmetic, and Ishikawa is aware most players don't find it satisfying enough currently. I'm so glad. Like, this really is the highlight of this interview. Like, they realize that the rewards aren't enough. So, thank God. Thank fucking God. Like that is genuinely good, and I'm you know, I'm now actually like slightly more inclined to do the next Criterion, because it might be like more incentivized. Don't expect changes this quickly. Yeah, you might be right. We don't have plans to change the fundamental formula at the moment, but as we release more variant dungeons, we might find something we're lacking or could improve, which we'd like to address with flexibility. Good. I mean, I'm glad they are listening. I just wish they would make it more obvious that they were listening. I really wish they would make it more obvious that they're listening. Like, just a bit more communication of the player base would go such a long way to satiating and calming people down. And of course, we plan on having new jobs coming with the next expansion to be fully playable in variant and Criterion, just so we don't have deep dungeons and other content. Yeah, of course. As for the future of variant and Criterion 7.0 and beyond, it will depend on the feedback we see from our players. So for now, we'd like to hear your thoughts and comments after playing through Mount Rock on the third dungeon, which is currently in development. Yeah, okay, so it's probably going to be a 7.0 sort of deal. You're right. I mean, you know, short interview, but the main takeaway is they realize they're not really worth doing that much. More than once, at least. So, you know, like that, that's a win, chat. Like, it is. That is still a win. You know, I'm not so negative that I will sit here and shit on them even when they say good things. I just wish they would make it more obvious when they're listening. And implement changes faster. Like, this is my other issue. Like, patch cycles have gotten longer. Like, what's this patch cycle? Like, 5 months? But there ain't much to show for it. Outside of, like, you know, the normal stuff we get. Yeah, I mean, it used to be, like, 3.5. And we were still getting more in the past. No, you know, it's... I just wish they were quicker on the ball. I wish they were quicker on the ball. But, you know, you know, a good thing is said in there. 7.0 onwards might actually be good for Criterion if they choose to keep it. Maybe. But the fact that they realize that, you know, there's not enough incentive is already a good step forward. I just wish that it didn't take almost an entire expansion to work out. I need more time, yeah. You know, people have already given up for the